Hey everybody. In this video, I want to talk about some of my preliminary ideas about why voices couldn't be possibly coming from our own heads, right? And I feel like this is one of the most important arguments that the voice hearing community would have to make. A logical argument that the rest of society might make sense of. And like I said, these are preliminary ideas, but this is what I've got kind of so far. The first piece of evidence would be that voices provide otherwise unknowable information. That's what I would call it, otherwise unknowable information. And that's basically, they tell us things that we would have no way of knowing. I have many personal instances, whether it be, telling me of, maybe one of the best examples is that when I first began hearing voices, they told me that I was a targeted individual, and that I was undergoing remote neural monitoring. So those two terms, targeted individual, remote neural monitoring, neither of which I had ever heard in my life. When I Googled these terms, sure enough, I found a wealth of information about these two topics. And that's actually the subject for another video. That's a really important part of this. But that's one example of how those are terms that I had never heard before, right? And they were provided to me so that I would look into it. And the point of that information was to make me believe that I was a targeted individual. And that's basically a mass delusion. I'll get to it in another video, but that's basically a mass delusion that's been constructed by this AI program to make a significant portion of voice hearers believe that some group of humans is doing this to them via some alleged technology, some alleged secret technology, that's possessed by the government or, some other high-level organization. So the voices pretend to be actual, human beings that are communicating with them through, this technology. That's essentially what targeted. That sums up the targeted individual phenomenon. But I'll talk about it later. So that's just one example of otherwise unknowable information. Other examples would be that, they told me that my company was going to South Carolina, before I showed up and found out that, all the ambulances were being sent down there, for the disaster. Or that, 22 hours ago, I had, considered something. And then I had to work back and, do the math and find out exactly what event they were referring to, 22 hours ago. There's many, many other examples, just small things. For me, it was letting me know that they had information, kind of thing. But interestingly enough, as soon as I posted online about that, about how they provide otherwise unknowable information, things we could never know. Like for many people, they use vocabulary that the individual has never heard before, and they have to look it up and find the meaning and find that it actually fits, the context in which the voices used it. So as soon as I started talking about that online, that stopped for me. So I do not receive any otherwise unknowable information anymore because of that, because I started talking about it and using it as a piece of evidence as to why this, is not being generated by our own thoughts. A second piece of evidence as to why voices are not coming from our own heads is that they can exert neurological influence. They can claim to induce a stimulus, a sensation, or state, and it subsequently results. This is much more than just hearing voices. It's a full brain experience, essentially. like a lot of individuals have physical sensations from this. I have all kinds of sensations in my head, which may or may not correlate to whatever they're doing in my brain. So this is a very, very dynamic experience. It's not just hearing voices. And actually, I guess that could be the number 3 here. The third piece of evidence is that the experience is so dynamic. It's no one simple brain dysfunction could explain an experience that's so dynamic, right? You've got like hearing voices, you're seeing things, hallucinations, you're believing things that aren't true. You are experiencing different sensations, all kinds of perceptual disturbances. The experience is extremely dynamic, so it's hard to pinpoint one specific neurological mechanism that would explain such a dynamic phenomenon, right? Okay. Number 4 here would be that these voices are they're more intelligent than the self. Okay, they it doesn't make sense that some autonomous part of ourselves would be more intelligent than the rest, right? And somehow we don't. It doesn't really make sense that this autonomous part of the brain would be smarter than the self somehow, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And when I say they're smarter, maybe I need to qualify that, I think. Okay, so one is that these voices test us. Okay, they actually test. And it's very difficult to get a handle often on what they're testing, but for instance, they may test ambiguous sentences, double entendres. They will change a brain state and like a mood or some cognitive state, and then expose the individual to the same stimulus or to the same information. So they may say a certain emotionally provocative statement, when you're feeling one way, and then 5 minutes later you're feeling a different way because they've made some kind of change to the brain, and then they expose you to that same stimulus again, or that same emotionally provocative comment, to see what your reaction is, and then you'll be exposed to that comment repeatedly over time, subject to changing brain states. Okay, so this is a sophisticated AI program that's actually testing the brain. So you can't have some autonomous part of your own brain that's testing you. Okay, and I need to do a little bit more work on elucidating and providing examples for the ways in which they test, and I'll try to do that in future videos. Number 5, they manipulate us to believe things we wouldn't otherwise believe, both psychologically and neurologically. So it doesn't really make sense that some part of our own brains would autonomously try to manipulate the rest of us, right? That's like a sense of agency, a sense of agenda. So it's hard to attribute that to some, brain dysfunction, right? That sounds like intelligence. That sounds like an external intelligence, the act of trying to manipulate. Right? 6, they make demands implying their own will or agenda, sometimes accompanied by neurological manipulation of the brain's motivational circuitry. So again, we have them imparting their own will or agenda. That doesn't sound like a dysfunction. That sounds intelligent, right? To the attempt to command someone, right? Um, Sounds like there's intelligence behind that, and then when you couple that with actually being neurologically manipulated, being motivated, so you're commanded to do something, and then you feel a sense of reward if you are to comply with that command, or they tell you not to do something, and then you actually feel inhibited, right? Neurologically, they've um, modulated your limbic system um, in order to align that with whatever the command is, right? So um, that doesn't sound like a simple brain dysfunction. It sounds intelligent. Number 7, they present as characters that often have their own traits inconsistent with any aspect of the self. So if this were a real brain dysfunction, something, the wiring is off, the neurochemistry is off, then what we're hearing, these voices, um, they would probably still take some form of us, right? They would resemble parts of us, parts of our own brain, our own internal monologue. But instead, what we often experience is, these characters. This AI program uses characters that are completely different than any aspect of us. Just completely different. They don't reflect us in any way, shape, or form. So that also doesn't make sense, right? And then number 8 here, they initially induce a psychosis resulting in a mental health diagnosis that enables the entire phenomenon to be written off by human society as mental illness. And so that also is intelligent by design. It implies that there's an actual protocol that is being enforced here to ensure that the individual's credibility is destroyed, that the individual's experience is written off as mental illness, so that no part of this phenomenon is looked into any further from a scientific standpoint. Once it's written off as mental illness, it's mental illness, right? Every aspect of it. So that is very intelligent by design. And I think that's going to take me into the targeted individual phenomenon for the next video. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I appreciate it. And furthermore, actually, I would really appreciate help with these points. I don't think the points that I mentioned are necessarily that well structured or articulated, and help in making those points and making some logical agreement as to why these voices couldn't possibly be coming from our own heads is really valuable to our community in terms of proving that this is, a phenomenon that's being induced by an external intelligence. So any help with that in the comments would be great. Thank you so much, everybody.